What if I told you that Hamilton's dream with Ferrari is collapsing in real time? What would happen if the most iconic F1 car is, in reality, a technical disaster that is destroying 7-time champion? Today we don't talk about one more season. We talk about a bomb that has already exploded. Lewis Hamilton's landing in Ferrari has not been the blow of effect that many expected, but an unexpected collapse, both sports and technical. What promised to be a historical synergy among one of the best pilots of all time and the most emblematic team of Formula One has become one of the most uncomfortable and worrying situations of the 2025 season. Hamilton's initial illusion, which visualized closing his career dressed in red and fighting by titles, has faded in front of a mechanical reality that seems not to give him a truce. The car they gave him, the SF25, is more a frustration machine than a championship tool. And the evidence is not only in the results. He is on his face, in his statements, in each forced maneuver he executes on the track. Ferrari promised an evolution of SF24, a car that had already shown signs of recovery in 2024. But the SF25 not only did not improve, it introduced new problems that compromised their performance structurally. In the center of this crisis is the rear suspension, a redesigned system with the aim of generating more grip and stability, but has failed at the most important time. The theory was solid. A new gearbox combined with a lower suspension architecture should improve the dynamic behavior of the car, especially in traction. However, what happened was the opposite. The new system suffers a lack of alarming rigidity that becomes critical when the car loads complete combustible. That is, when the real race begins. In the race, with about 100 kilograms of fuel, the car sinks. Literally. The suspension yields more than calculated, compromising the longitudinal inclination of the car and causing the flat background of the SF25 to touch more than allowed. This not only generates irregular wear, but it breaks aerodynamic stability. Under normal low-cargo conditions, as in the China sprint that Hamilton won, the car works. But that is the exception, not the rule. In the race, the car loses all competitiveness. The direct consequence was lived with their disqualification in China itself, where the sensors recorded excessive wear in the ground slip blocks. It is the result of poor height management, a height that Ferrari fails to control without sacrificing speed. The dilemma intensifies when the general car balance is analyzed. The SF25 has a very narrow operation window, which means that small adjustments generate disproportionate consequences. If you raise the suspension to avoid wear, you lose aerodynamic load. If you keep the ideal height, risk disqualification. There is no midpoint, and that is catastrophic in a sport where fine balance makes the difference between winning and being out of the top 10. This lack of operational margin has been devastating for Hamilton, whose driving style demands precision and sensitivity. The British has been forced to modify his way of entering into a curve, releasing the accelerator ahead of time and braking more conservatively, only to maintain control of a rear that simply does not respond. All this derives in mid-curve subviring, a behavior that goes totally against the fluidity it needs to extract the best of the car. But the problem is not just technical. There is a psychological component of wear that cannot be ignored. Hamilton came motivated, wanting to contribute experience and leadership. However, when facing a capricious, unpredictable car and far from the level it needs, its morale is compromised. It would be expected that Ferrari had a quick solution to at least stabilize the performance, but the feeling is that the problem is so in the background that not even the engineers are clear where to start. Technical communication between pilot and engineers looks tense, with adjustments that do not work, promises that are not fulfilled, and a car that, instead of evolving, seems to go back. The SF25, instead of being a championship weapon, is a tactical and technical trap. Each race is not planned to win, but to survive. It is the most dramatic scenario possible for a pilot who left Mercedes' stability looking for a final opportunity for glory. What he has found is a team that still fails to deliver a competitive car and an environment that, despite the initial enthusiasm, already shows signs of internal tension. Hamilton's story in Ferrari is far from being the fairy tale that everyone imagined. On the contrary, he is emerging as one of the biggest challenges of his career, a challenge that is not resolved with experience or talent, but with a deep transformation that, until now, seems very distant. Despite the serious problems presented by the SF25, Lewis Hamilton managed to show flashes of his legendary talent at certain specific moments. One of them was his victory in the sprint race of the China Grand Prix, a forceful performance that briefly excited both the team and fans. But these types of results are more an anomaly than a constant. The general performance of the car is so irregular that this victory failed to mask reality. The car is not designed to sustain a complete race rhythm under normal conditions. When Hamilton must compete with full tank and face a complete race with multiple variables, the car loses competitiveness and the British is relegated. The SF-25 works in very specific and limited conditions, which prevents any pilot, even one of Hamilton's stature, to show consistency. The strategy in this context becomes a double-edged sword. Ferrari has been unable to adapt his tactical decisions to the unpredictable nature of his car. In the Australia Grand Prix, for example, Hamilton was the victim of a wrong strategy under rain. While other teams changed to rain tires at the right time, Ferrari chose to keep it on the track too long. This not only affected his rhythm, but left him trapped in the middle of the platoon, exposed to unfavorable conditions and without margin to recover positions. Real-time decision-making, which should compensate for technical deficits, has ended up deepening problems. It is a chain of errors that reveals a lack of synergy between the technical, strategic, and operational areas of the equipment. On the psychological plane, where it begins to be visible, Hamilton, accustomed to an environment in which everything revolved around his figure, is now in a structure that cannot give it guarantees. The car does not respond, the results do not arrive, and the media pressure and fans intensify with each race. Lewis had imagined this stage of his career as an epic closure, a way of consecrating with a legendary team. Instead, it has found a frustrating scenario where each practice session, each classification, and each career are containment and survival exercises. His body language, his responses in the interviews, even his behavior in the paddock, shows a pilot who is struggling to maintain motivation in front of an environment that does not offer any certainty. Compare your situation with Charles Leclerc, your teammate, only deepens the contrast. Leclerc, although also affected by the deficiencies of the SF-25, has achieved better results and is more adapted to the car. This feeds the media narrative that Hamilton is not yielding to the expected level, which increases internal pressure. Actually, both pilots face the same technical limitations, but the difference in driving style makes Leclerc, with their most aggressive approach and deep knowledge of the Ferrari environment, serve a slight advantage. That constant comparison weakens Hamilton's emotional and psychological position within the team. Meanwhile, chaos in Red Bull acts like a warning mirror. The case of Liam Lawson, expelled from the team after just 2 race weekends, shows that there is no room for error, even for learning. The RB21, although fast, is difficult to drive, and Red Bull is not willing to wait for its pilots to adapt. This decision, in addition to being sports, sends a clear message. The pressure is absolute, and if you do not produce results immediately, you are out. In this volatile environment, Yuki Tsunoda has taken its place, but with the weight of knowing that its future can also depend on a pair of poorly managed sessions. The Lawson case illustrates how technical errors move to the human plane, turning F1 into a survival scenario rather than development. Faced with this chaos and the uncertainty of Ferrari, McLaren appears as an absolute contrast. Its aerodynamic evolution has been so precise that it is no longer surprising to see them lead sessions, win races and master in changing conditions. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, far from being only young promises, are consolidating themselves as key figures in the fight for the title. The most notable is the trust with which the team manages every weekend. Its strategic decisions are appropriate, the car responds well to each adjustment, and its pilots know exactly what to expect in each circuit. That stability, both technical and emotional, positions them as the new standard to follow. While other teams try to solve internal crises, McLaren builds on a solid base, without dramas, without improvisations. This second block of the season shows a clear pattern. Success does not depend only on having a talented pilot or a fast car. Technical cohesion is needed, a precise strategic reading, and a stable mentality. Hamilton, no matter how more talent he has, can't win alone. Ferrari, if you really want to compete, you need to understand that the problem is not your pilot but the complete system. Until there is a structural change in the way of operating, the SF-25 will be more a symbol of frustration than of glory. And Hamilton, meanwhile, must decide how long you are willing to wait. What we are witnessing with Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari is not simply a complicated adaptation or a start of the lose season. It is a turning point in his career, a situation that pushes him to question his own decision to have changed equipment. For the first time since he debuted in Formula One, the British is trapped in an environment that not only limits his ability to compete, but also questions his role as the centerpiece of a winning project. It is no longer about isolated errors or a bad streak. It is a combination of structural deficiencies, poor management, and failed technical decisions that have transformed their commitment to Ferrari into a land full of uncertainty. Each race becomes a battle not for victory, but by finding consistency in the midst of chaos. And the most worrying thing is that there are no clear signals of short-term improvement. Ferrari seems paralyzed by his own contradictions. He wants to compete for titles but has failed to build a solid technical base, find stability, but changes direction every time difficulties arise. The SF25 symbolizes that lack of coherence. A car that has potential in specific conditions, but collapses when complete performance is required. The team, far from solving the problems, seems trapped in a spiral of reactive adjustments that only complicate the situation even more. Hamilton needs more than aerodynamic adjustments or chassis updates. You need a transformation in the way Ferrari understands modern Formula One. This leaves a clear image of the new order on the grille. McLaren leads stability, Mercedes seeks to reinvent himself with a mixture of youth and experience. Red Bull tries to turn off internal fires, and Ferrari, with all its historical weight, is at risk of being trapped in its own inertia. Hamilton, in the midst of this panorama, represents a dual figure. On the one hand, it is a symbol of excellence, resilience, and experience. But on the other, it also reflects what happens when talent collides with dysfunctional structures. His legacy is not at stake, but his last stage as a pilot can be stained if Ferrari does not respond in time. The question that arises is whether Hamilton will have the necessary patience to wait for the project to mature, or if it will look for an early way out before the situation wears it completely. Rumors in the paddock already circulate, and although he maintains a diplomatic speech, it is evident that his level of frustration is increasing. Time runs and Formula One does not expect anyone. If Ferrari wants to save something of this season, you must make structural, deep and brave decisions. It is not enough to trust Hamilton's talent. A technical revolution is needed, a clear strategic approach, and, above all, a culture that puts the team again. At the moment, the 2025 season advances without Ferrari to consolidate a competitive project. Hamilton, meanwhile, continues to fight against a car that does not allow him to show his best. And although there are still many races ahead, the clock runs, and every lost prize not only moves Ferrari to the title, but pushes Hamilton to rethink his future in the category. Because if something has demonstrated this season, even the biggest need more than talent to win. They need a team that works. And that, today, is what Ferrari is not getting to be. The 2025 Formula One season has begun to brutally reveal the hidden realities of each team. For Lewis Hamilton, the change to Ferrari has not been the triumphal beginning that many expected, but a constant fight against a defective car and a structure that still does not find its course. The experience accumulated by the British pilot has been insufficient to reverse the deep defects of the SF25, which drags it to inconsistent yields and moves it away from the objectives that had been set. Ferrari, instead of building a successful environment around his new star, seems to have fallen into the same errors of lack of direction and coherence that have marked their last years. The general grille panorama is also changing. Red Bull, although it is still competitive, faces increasing internal pressure, with hasty movements such as Lawson's replacement and tensions that threaten their long-term stability. McLaren, on the other hand, has managed to capitalize every opportunity, showing a technical and tactical preparation that positions them as the team to beat in this new stage. Mercedes, with a more patient approach and a commitment to young talent, works silently to recover land, while other teams like Aston Martin and Alpine struggle to find consistency. In this context, Hamilton and Ferrari represent more than a sports project in crisis. They are the living example that talent, history, and desire for success are not enough if they are not accompanied by a solid structure, successful decisions, and a long-term vision. The current Formula One does not forgive improvisation or basic errors. Every detail counts, and teams that fail to adapt quickly remain irremediably behind. Looking towards the future, the great unknown is whether Ferrari will be able to transform this crisis into an opportunity for real reconstruction, or if he will simply continue to sail in mediocrity while he sees how other teams take the lead. For Hamilton, the decision is even more critical. Trusting a recovery that does not show clear signs of materializing, or looking for alternatives before its legacy as one of the largest is tarnished by circumstances outside its control. What is clear is that, for both, the time to react is shortened to each race.